All right, let's get right into it. We all wonder what it really takes to get ahead in life. Is it just about hard work or more schooling, or is it something else entirely? Well, today, we're going to break down a really fascinating global study that sifted through data from 153 countries to find the actual drivers of upward mobility. And let me tell you, the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? It's super personal, and it really gets to the heart of this idea we call intergenerational mobility. It's that promise that where you start in life doesn't have to be where you end up. But just how true is that promise around the world today?
So, to start figuring this out, we first have to understand all the pieces of this massive puzzle. This study gives us a great framework for looking at mobility on a global scale, and that all starts with making sure we're speaking the same language.
To measure this huge concept, the study zeroes in on one specific thing: education. Now, you might be wondering, why not income? Well, income can be all over the place, right? It changes with inflation, cost of living, but education? That's a much more stable, comparable yardstick we can use across different countries and even across generations. Plus, it's one of the best predictors of how much you'll earn down the line anyway.
Now, this whole idea points to a pretty stark reality that researchers have seen over and over again. It's called the Great Gatsby Curve, and it shows this powerful, kind of troubling link between a country's inequality and its mobility. Basically, the bigger the gap between the rich and poor in a society, the harder it is for anyone to climb that ladder. Okay, so if inequality is the big problem, what's the solution? For decades, the answer from governments and policymakers has seemed pretty obvious. Just get more education to more people. But is it really the silver bullet we've all been led to believe it is? So, the common wisdom is that expanding access to education is the key. And on the surface, that makes total sense, right? More school should mean more opportunities. And look, it definitely helps, but only up to a point. What this research shows is that just opening more schools and universities isn't the whole story. Its impact can actually be seriously blunted by other, much more powerful forces at play. And that is the million-dollar question this study really digs into. If just throwing more education at the problem isn't enough to guarantee people can move up in the world, what else is going on? What are those hidden variables that are either holding people back or maybe pushing them forward? This brings us right to the core finding of the study. The research zeroes in on a factor that, we all talk about, but we might be dramatically underestimating just how powerful it is: the direct influence of your parents. So the study isolated three key factors. First up, you've got education expansion. That's just the overall increase in schooling from one generation to the next. Second, education inequality, the gap between the most and least educated people around you. But it's this third one that turns out to be the absolute game changer: parental dependency. Just think of it as the like father, like son effect. It measures exactly how tightly a child's education level is tied to their parents' education level. And boom, this chart just lays it all out. When the researchers isolated the true causal impact of each of these factors, the results were absolutely staggering. Parental dependency, basically your family background, has a dramatically larger impact on your ability to move up than both education expansion and education inequality combined. It's not even close. Let's put a number on that to see how huge this is. The effect size, which is just a way to measure how strong the influence is of parental dependency, is 0.10. Now, for comparison, the effect size of educational inequality is just 0.009. That means your family background is more than 10 times more powerful in shaping your future than the educational gaps in your society. It is the single biggest factor by a mile. And hey, this isn't just some isolated finding. The study points to other major research, like from Nobel laureate James Heckman, who found that we might be understating this family connection by as much as 100%. In other words, family background could matter even more than we ever thought. So, if parental influence is something we've been seriously underestimating, what about factors we might be overemphasizing? The study also took a really hard look at another major topic that always comes up in conversations about mobility: the gender gap. Okay, so first, if you just look at the raw data, a gender gap does seem to exist. The analysis shows that, on average, daughters tend to experience statistically lower mobility than others. And this confirms what a lot of people already think, that there's some kind of bias at play. But is that the full picture? This is where it gets really, really interesting. Once the researchers applied their causal model, controlling for all those other factors like parental dependency, where you live, economic development, the whole shebang, the actual direct causal effect of gender, well, it shrinks dramatically. Its effect size is just 0.005. Now remember parental dependency's effect? That was 0.10. The impact of gender on its own is tiny in comparison. And what's more, this already small effect has been consistently getting even smaller over time. When you look at people born from the 1940s all the way to the 1980s, mobility for daughters has shown significant and steady improvement all across the globe. The trend is crystal clear. Whatever gap did exist is rapidly closing. Okay, so let's put all the pieces together. After stripping away all the noise to find the real causal story, what should we actually be focusing on if we want to build a more mobile society? The study's conclusion is pretty stark. Our focus might be totally misplaced. We seem to be overemphasizing the role of gender bias, which, yes, it's real, but its causal impact is shrinking and relatively small. And at the same time, we are massively underestimating the single biggest barrier to mobility, that powerful, persistent influence of your family background.
The study's author, Kan De-young, puts it very plainly. We need a fundamental reassessment of how we think about this. Policies focused on just expanding education are good, but they simply can't overcome the immense gravitational pull of parental dependency. If we want to break the cycle of inequality, we have to confront this like father, like son effect head-on.
And that leaves us with a really challenging final thought. If the circumstances of your birth, the education and status of your parents are overwhelmingly the most important factor in your success, what do we actually mean when we talk about equality of opportunity? And maybe more importantly, what would it really take to create it?